Right, so Brandon's new novel is soon to be released. It's obviously another Mistborn novel, it's a standalone. We wanted to know, what can we expect?
Yes, Alloy of Law. Alloy of Law takes place several hundred years following the events of Hero of Ages. This was always the plan with the Mistborn series. I pitched it to my editor as a sequence of series set in the same world with an evolution of technology, which is not something I'd seen done very much in fantasy books, letting the technology progress and seeing how magic interacts with it. Alloy of Law is the story of a man named Waxillium, who has spent the last 20 years living out in the roughs being a lawman. And his uncle dies, and we find out that Waxillium is actually the heir to his house. And back in the city of Elendel, they've got this sort of half lordship, half elected body that leads the government, and he has inherited a seat in this body and responsibility for thousands of people who work in his house. And so he has to leave the life of a lawman and come back to the city, which is patterned after 1910 New York, and live among the elite of the city, and yet he's kind of an unpolished sort of guy, having been out in the roughs all this time. And it's his story trying to make sense of his world. It's also a mystery. It's a very fast-paced sort of mystery. Kind of, imagine it this way. This is how I've been describing it lately. Imagine a Sherlock Holmes story.
Okay.
Now replace Sherlock Holmes with Clint Eastwood. Yep. And add magic.
Okay.
And that's what you've got.
Excellent. Okay, I'll go on to the next question. In January 2010 it was, you said that a Mistborn film had been optioned.
Yes.
There was also a game in progress. Yeah. What's the status on this? I know a lot of people are kind of excited to hear that.
The Mistborn RPG game is a go.
Okay.
For sure. We have cover art. They're trying to release it by Gen Con, which is the big gaming convention, this year, and have it available for purchase by fall. It is certainly happening. It's 100% now. The film, the producers have finished a screenplay, which is quite good. I'm very pleased with it, and they are pitching the film in Hollywood right now.
Okay.
We don't know what will happen, what will come of it, but they are pitching it in Hollywood right now.
Excellent. So, Mistborn, as you said, was originally planned, and I think still is, a trilogy of trilogies.
Yes.
Obviously you've got the Stormlight at the moment, but you say you're still underworked. Can you give us any insight to what's to come in the future? And is it in some ways hard to let go of the original trilogy? I know you've done it for standalone, but then to really move on.
Letting go of the original trilogy will be kind of hard, but in some ways they don't have to, because the original trilogy has become the mythology and lore of the world, which is really fun to work with as a writer. Beyond that, there are continuing characters. That there was always planned to be continuing characters, and I can't say much without giving spoilers, but there are characters from the original trilogy appearing in this book, several of them. Some of them are hidden. You're going to have to search and hunt to figure out who's who. Some of them are less hidden. In the future, the second trilogy is going to be one that deals with a... by this point in the world, and Alloy of Law is the same case, there are no Mistborn anymore. There are only Mistings for various reasons that I don't want to give spoilers on, but there are Mistings. The second trilogy happens in a modern setting. When we get to that, Alloy of Law is in an industrial setting, in the modern setting, and there we will be doing a story eventually about a Mistborn serial killer and a SWAT team of Allomancers who, we're talking people with machine guns and Navy SEAL Allomancers whose job it is to hunt down Allomancer criminals, and they reveal something unexpected. How about that? Right, so obviously Twitter. Brandon, huge Twitter user, most of you will know that and probably follow him if you don't. Brian Sanderson, that's his Twitter account. We have a great question from one of the forum users that I think deserves some time. What's the oddest, harshest, and most uplifting thing that someone has said to you over Twitter? Man, that's rough. I see more than I can respond to. Yeah. And I do apologize to people who tweet me on Twitter. I try to respond when I can, but I can't always respond. There's just too much happening. but I try to do batches where I respond for a little while to people. The most interesting things I see, oh boy, the internet is a weird place. And you see, the most interesting would probably be some of the fan fiction ideas that I've seen passed around involving my characters in very strange situations.
Okay.
I won't go any further than that. The most uplifting is when a book of mine helps someone who's having just a hard time. I would say that, or even the books. You know, I became a writer in part because of how much I loved what the great books that I read when I was younger did to me, what they did to me inside. I'm not naturally an emotional person, and stories are one of the few things that can provoke strong emotions in me. And so when my books do that for someone else, it's very humbling and gratifying. Harshest things that people say, it's really harsh when I let people down. When someone has built up my books so much, then has loved them so much, and give them to someone else who reads them and they just don't work for them. Not every story is going to work for everyone, and I understand that, and I know that logically, but it hurts to know that I've let down readers who were expecting something wonderful, and for them it isn't wonderful.
So, Brandon's always been a big fantasy fan. He calls his characters from other fantasy novels that he's read buddies of his from college and university years. We wanted to know from Brandon, what 5 epic fantasy series would you recommend to the fantasyfaction.com readers?
5 fantasies I recommend people read. Taigana by Guy Gabriel Kay is my go-to recommendation. I think it's one of the most brilliant standalone epic fantasies ever written. Melanie Rahm's Sunrunner books are nowadays a little less known than they used to be, and I think that they are fantastic and people should read them. I have really enjoyed Jim Butcher's Codex Alera books, and I would heartily recommend them to any reader of fantasy. Let's see, other great epic fantasy, there's so many. I just finished The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin, and I really enjoyed that. I think I can recommend that one wholeheartedly. It's a Hugo Award nominee, so I'm not the only one that's really enjoying that. And 5th, let's pick one more. I could recommend Pat Rothfuss, but you've all already read that. I could recommend Brett Weeks, but you've all already read that. Let's see if I can find something you haven't all already read that I think is great. I mention Dragon's Bane all the time, and so people have already heard that recommendation from me. But that's a fantastic book. Absolutely, highly, strongly recommend that you read Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hamley if you haven't.
This was one of the first fantasy books.
First fantasy book I ever read, and the book that turned me into a fantasy writer, just simply because it was the one that it was the first, and I still very much love that book. So I think that's a good list. I don't know. Those are always ones I recommend, though, and so it's hard to think of new things because you guys all read so much. You already are aware of all of them, but there you are.
Something I found interesting between Brandon Sanderson and other writers, and Peter Brett, for example, when he finished his Painted Man, Warded Man book, depending which country you're in, his agent did like it, but he said that there were some things in there that didn't quite fit to the market. So Peter went away, he read this book, Writing to Sell, I believe it was called. He came back, gave his book back to the agent after having kind of revised it from this book, and the agent loved it, and kind of what happened with that one. It was one of the kind of most popular fantasy series going at the moment. Something similar happened to Brandon. When he sent his work out to publishers, they thought it was good, but they weren't really sure how it met with the market's kind of expectations. Brandon went away. He started writing stories that he thought the market would like. In his own words, he thought it killed his writing. So what I wanted to know from Brandon is, what is it about his work that means he can't write towards the market successfully? Instead, he has to, in his own words again, write from the heart to make his stories successful.
That's an excellent question, and there are differing viewpoints on this. For instance, I remember talking to John Scalzi, And he said, you know, when I wanted to publish, I went and looked and saw what was cool, what was selling, and I went and I wrote my own take on some of that. And that worked fantastically well for him. And I think for me, part of the problem was, now, one thing I'll add as a caveat to this: yes, write from the heart, but make sure you are reading widely. Read widely what you want to write, but also read a lot of things from varying different genres and whatnot. I just found that if I tried to anticipate what people wanted rather than writing what I wanted, I wrote terrible books. Okay. And when I gave no care to what people wanted and only gave care to what I thought made a fantastic book, I did a good job. And this might have to do with the fact that I was just bad at judging what people wanted. Okay. That could be it. It probably has more to do with the fact that I naturally write a lot of my books at a big, long, epic length. And what people get telling me is, you need to write shorter books. You need to write books like so-and-so or like so-and-so. And that was wrong advice for me. I didn't need to write books like so-and-so or like so-and-so. I didn't need to write books like George R. R. Martin, fantastic writer as he is. I didn't need to write books like him. I needed to write books like me. And that's what worked for me. Different writers will have different things that work for them. And certainly I can write things that, like for instance, I write on the Wheel of Time. And in those cases, I'm taking a lot of pain to make sure that what I'm writing fits with the genre, with the stories that have come before, and with what the readers expect these stories to be like. And so I can do it. But I love doing it on the Wheel of Time. And I don't know what the difference between doing it there on the Wheel of Time and those early days that I spent trying to write toward the market and having a horrible experience. But for me, I need complete creative freedom. Otherwise, my books have no life to them. And even with the Wheel of Time, Harriet has given me complete creative freedom to do whatever I think needs to be done to tell great stories. And I think I thrive in that situation. If I instead had come into the Wheel of Time, they would have said, you have to do this exactly, this exactly, this exactly, this exactly, I think that I would have done a poor job. I would have been the wrong author, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted someone that they could turn it over to who would really take ownership of it. In a small part, of course it doesn't belong to me, but you know what I mean. Take real pride and say, I am going to do this the best way that I know how, and not just write a book and be done with it, but say, no, this is, I can't even explain the difference. This is me now. The Wheel of Time, I am inexorably linked to it, and my soul is linked to it. And those aren't those books I wrote for those people. Those are books that I am deeply, deeply emotionally involved in. And I can only, I think, do that because I've been reading them for so long, since a kid.
Thank you.
Since I was a kid, yeah.